retired public servant for the state of Delaware. I am also an adjunct professor at Delaware State University. I'm an adjunct professor of history and political science. The courses that I teach most are African American history. I'm here today. I'm going to talk to you guys about the erasure of Black history, or the attempted erasure of Black history. Ms. Charlotte, she talked about the sense of pride that is running through the country right now in celebration of this 250th anniversary. It's difficult for some people who look like us when folks at the highest level are purposefully erasing our figures. I don't know how many of you know, but they have gone to Arlington and have removed any references to Black soldiers in Arlington. They have removed in Philadelphia, of all places, they have attempted to remove any information about the enslaved Africans in Philadelphia at the time of the country's founding, and other places as well. So having the ability tonight to speak on this topic is giving me an opportunity to get some stuff off my chest. I'm a visual person, so I want to paint this picture for you. As this country is celebrating its 250th anniversary, how do you do that if half of the members of the family are erased from the picture? See, we can't have an honest discussion about the 250-year story if 40 million Americans' ancestors are being treated as footnotes and not the foundation for this country. This is not just history. This is about identity. It's about civic participation and the national integrity of this country. See, African Americans have been a part of this country's history since the beginning. We're a part of the fiber. Enslaved Africans built this nation physically and economically. We physically built the U.S. Capitol, the White House, and we worked in those plantations that fueled the global cotton markets that make America the #1 economy in the world today. The gross national product in the antebellum South alone rivaled that of industrial nations like France. That was early contribution to this country. We were patriots. The first life lost for the ideal of this democracy was a Black man, Crispus Attucks, who raised the stick for democracy. A stick because a Black man couldn't own a gun. He did so while many other people that we praise and we celebrate were in taverns in Boston talking about revolution. He simply said, "I'm done talking." That's the birth of this democracy. But we've been in every single war and participated in every single war. In the Civil War, we had 180,000 Black troops in the Union Army. In World War I, we had masterful fighting units that helped liberate Europe, like the Harlem Hellfighters. In World War II, of course, we had the Tuskegee Airmen and the Buffalo Soldiers. Then we had our Vietnam veterans. And of course, we've had Black soldiers who participated in the Middle Eastern conflict. We cannot forget these amazing individuals, and these individuals demonstrated our patriotism from the very beginning. Let's talk about innovation. Inventors, and I hate, but I have to do it because this is an environment to teach, right? And that's what I'm kind of doing here. You can't take that professor out of me. So I have to use the nomenclature and the terms that work. But these individuals were so much more than inventors. But I'm just going to say, from an ingenuity standpoint, people like Lewis Latimer, Garrett Morgan, Dr. Charles Drew, Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, their calculations got America to the moon, good people. See, these are not Black achievements. They're American achievements. And these are not Black achievers. They were American achievers. So how does this affect our education, right? And how does the exploitation and the attempted erasure of Black history affect our education system? It's simple. It creates gaps in curriculum. See, in certain places and pockets in this country, they describe things like the transatlantic slave trade as migrant workers. They use terms like the War of Northern Aggression versus the Civil War. And the interesting thing is, for those of you who are not attached to the education system, the same publishers publish the books that make both references. It just depends on which region of the country it goes to is what you read. So you can't even say, oh, it's certain publishers. No, they're the same publishers. It's just the way they package the information and they send it to other places. And so you say, well, what's the big deal there? Anybody know what a poorly educated teenager becomes?
A poorly educated adult.
A poorly educated adult. There's no magic wand. You don't throw a switch, and when that individual that was poorly educated at 16 years old, when that individual was 22 years old, they all of a sudden get it. It doesn't work that way. And a lot of that is what fuels and perpetuates stereotypes that exist, and it also fuels and perpetuates certain tropes about how folks live. Think about it. Education is the greatest indicator of the quality of life for all Americans. When we take a look at where African Americans and where people of color lag in places and parts of society, all of them are influenced by education. And to get back to these curriculum gaps, right? You wonder how you could have a 30, 40-year-old white person who doesn't understand that wealth gaps that persist in African American communities are not because these people are lazy, that these things go back to the late 19th century. And then they persisted and they turned into things like redlining. See, if you don't have that foundational knowledge of what was done to keep these individuals oppressed and to economically hold them and stunt them, then you have no way of understanding today and in this current environment why it is as it is. And that is one of the hardest things. I have had to, in my adult life, I have had to grow patience with folks. I learned there is such thing as sincere ignorance, right? Folks who truly don't know, because I lived the youthful part of my life believing that most of these people I was interacting were conscientiously stupid, right? They were doing this on purpose. And it was the patience that came along with becoming an adult and understanding that that's not the case for everybody. And most of the time, that comes from a lack of education and being poorly educated in the K-12 school system. Also, right, our education shapes some of our history. You guys know for decades, there were more Confederate monuments than there were monuments of Black people. Can you imagine that? Guess what? For a lot of folks in a lot of places, they didn't have to imagine. They walked past these things, right? What do we lose when Black history is erased? Empathy. Students who don't learn shared history are less equipped to understand those experiences of their fellow citizens. Becomes policy ignorance as well. Voters who don't understand redlining and the GI Bill's radical exclusions or school funding inequities cannot make informed decisions at the ballot box. And economic blindness. We cannot address the racial wealth gap if we pretend it materialized out of smoke. And then, of course, there's missed innovation. HBCUs have produced a disproportionate share of Black doctors, lawyers, engineers, leaders, yet they remain chronically underfunded. There's also a ripple effect. A child who never learns that Black Americans helped invent America may grow up believing that those communities have contributed absolutely nothing. Also, know and understand, this is not a Black problem. This is an American problem. Other countries, they view Americans as Americans first. Their disdain for Americans and their thoughts about Americans, they don't separate them first the way that we separate and the way that we live siloed, right? I'm not going to use segregation, right? That's a legal term, right? But the way we continue to live siloed in many communities, other countries don't do it that way. So now at 250, we got to have a call to action. We need to have comprehensive mandatory Black history curriculum. I love that in this state in 2021, the legislature passed House Bill 198, which I was one of the many authors of that. But I also have concerns. Many of you may not know. There's no teeth to that legislation. There's nothing that holds a district accountable if they don't adhere to the tenets of that education. So, what my grandfather would have said, and I did neglect to tell you all in the onset that I'm a Lewis boy, I'm a Sussex County boy, I was raised right here in Lewis. What my grandfather would have said is that was pacification. They gave you something to put in your mouth that has no nutritional substance. Right? And that's not a knock on our legislators, because I was certainly a part of what it took to get that legislation over the hump, and it wasn't easy. You would have thought it should have been easier. So that's not a knock on them, but it is a call to action for us. We gotta do more. We gotta get some teeth in that. And another thing about that, right? Before retiring, my last stop was with a school district, one of the larger school districts in the state of Delaware. One of the neat things, I was a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. The state does require every district to submit a report on what their adherence to House Bill 198 is. That's the Black History Law. Check this out. Look at that report. It gets thinner as it goes south. I can tell some of y'all have seen that report already. Anybody surprised? No. It gets thinner the farther you go south. So that needs teeth for sure. I just want to say this, and I don't want to hog more time, because we want to make sure that we have time for folks here. It's a time, the 250th is a time to celebrate. We're all Americans. But at the same time, we got work to do. Thank you.